Today, we are going to cover some advanced topics in RMarkdown. Um, RMarkdown is great, as hopefully some of you are starting to believe me, despite making you learn multiple forms of coding simultaneously. Um, it's a really useful tool, and it's useful because it's flexible. And in effect, if most of your work is going to be quantitative and is going to be using R, you can effectively replace the entire Microsoft Office suite with R Markdown, right? I can never touch PowerPoint again. I can never touch Word again. I can do all of my paper writing. I can do all of my slide writing. I can do all of it within our Markdown. I mean, you've seen that I write my slides in our Markdown, and I'll cover a little bit about how to do that today. But I'm going to also show you a demo of a report that I've written and that I'm turning into an academic paper that I wrote entirely in our Markdown. And I'll kind of just give you some nudges on the first steps toward if you want to go down this path of writing in plain text. So our Markdown, right, is a plain text format, right? So when I'm writing in our Markdown, let's just start a new file so I can give you a better sense of exactly what I mean. And let's do it in Word just for the heck of it, so we can actually format our Markdown documents into Word. I call this a demo. So there's two kinds of basic text editors. There's what's called a what you see is what you get editor, sometimes referred to as WYSIWYG, which sounds crazy until I'll type it here. What you see is what you get, right? WYSIWYG is the acronym that people use for it, which is, effectively whatever you put on the screen is what will display when you print a document, right? That's what it is. What you see is exactly what you get. Now, formats like Markdown are plain text, meaning when I open a .rmd file, I don't need special software to open it. It's just a text file on my computer, right? Where all it is a plain text document. If I open a Microsoft Word doc, well, let's if you ever try to open a Microsoft Word document with a text editor, you're going to get a jumble of code, right? Because it's actually a software like XML and it's a special version flavor of XML, I believe. So the formatting of the document, it's not actually readable as plain text, but this is, right? So here's what we're going to do for Word document, right? So we have here, right, you can see that we have, this is in our Markdown document. We have all this code. When I click knit, that'll be italicized, right? This will be italics is 1 star and bold is 2 stars, right? And this will be bold, right? Now, in Word, we would just, click the bold button or click the italics button. So we get, but it's also going to simultaneously, let's kind of remove summary cars and all that for a second, right? Let's remove all the plots. And we have section headers here, but let's knit this document. We'll save it as Word demo, right? So we have our text here, and it's just plain text at this point, right? What our Markdown is going to do now is it's going to go to an engine called Pandoc, and Pandoc is a piece of software that comes installed on your computer once you have our Studio installed and our Markdown installed, that will convert plain text documents to a variety of other formats on the fly, including HTML, including Word, and including PDF if you have LaTeX installed. Okay, so check it out, right? We went from this thing that had just plain text in it, nothing formatted, but it had some simple formatting instructions, like this is a header, this is bold, this is italic. And it translated that such that the 1 stars were italic and the 1 stars were bold, right? Now in Word, I make changes in the document itself and I see them immediately. But implicitly, there's code that's transforming the document that I'm not seeing, and hence I'm not controlling, right? Now, if you yearn for more control over what's going on inside your Word document, right, then a plain text approach is the way to go for you. The reason I prefer it is when I'm looking at a Word document, I'm like, ooh, I hate that color. I'm going to change that section header. Ooh, I hate the way this is indented. I'm going to mess with that. And you get so focused on the formatting of the document that you lose focus on the text, right? And at the end of the day, as academic authors, the text is really what matters, right? Layout is going to happen in a journal anyway, right? Whatever's in my Word document is not actually how the thing is going to look at the end, regardless. Not to mention, Word documents are not especially pretty in the first place, right? Okay, so the benefit of working in plain text, on the one hand, is that I get control over what my stuff looks like. But I also don't futz over what it looks like as I'm writing. I focus on the words as I'm writing, right? So this turns into that, and that's cool. But the other thing, right, of course, as we've seen, is that I can embed code into my document itself such that I'm not copying and pasting stuff from various places and potentially making errors as I go, right? So this ensures that there's a really seamless workflow between my data analysis on the one hand and my writing on the other. They're actually going on at the same time, right? So let's kind of dive in. I have a brief outline for today. And please do stop me if there's special things you would like some more insight into or how to do particular things. So the outline for
Quick question.
yeah.
Oh, just the example you just showed. You did that outside of the code chunk. Does that work within the code chunk too? Like the star, this is italics. Okay.
No, and generally you don't want to be rendering text inside a code chunk, right? So like my writing is not happening inside a code chunk. My writing is happening, I have writing code, but I'm not usually showing my code. What I'm usually doing is using my code to render an output that goes into the document, like a plot or a table, right?
Okay.
If I'm
Yeah.
doing a stats homework, maybe, or I'm writing a stats textbook, I do want to show you my code sometimes,
Mhm.
right? But yeah. Anyway, so first I just want to remind everyone about global options, right? So the first thing you'll notice when you start a new RMarkdown document, I go new RMarkdown, and let's just call it an HTML document. You should default to writing in HTML as everyone has done, right? That's easiest to work with. But I'm going to show you how to do PDF today. Okay, so you note that the first thing you get in a new R Markdown document is this setup chunk that says include equals false. And then it says knitr ops chunk $set echo equals true. Okay, what that does is it says for every code chunk that comes later, echo is set to true, right? Now that's good if I'm demoing code and if I'm submitting a stats homework and I want my code to be embedded. But for example, if I'm writing a report that I'm going to submit to Casey Family Programs for a grant that I was working on, and this is going to turn into an academic paper, I definitely don't want to show my code, right? What I want to show is the results. So I can turn echo equal, so it's set by true to true by default. I can turn it off, right? And now every chunk in my document, the code is going to be hidden. The code is never going to show up in this final document now, right? So let's just see the difference. Here's echo equals true. And let's knit this, and we'll call this demo 2. I'm going to have a lot of demo files by the end of the day. Right now we can see the code, summary cars, right? But what happens if I turn echo equals false? And I'm just hitting Command-Shift-K to knit the document. Now the code is gone. I still see the output, right? But the code is gone. And that's usually good. That's when I'm writing a paper, I don't want to show my code, I want to show my output. Right? Okay, so we could do echo equals F. The other thing though, let's say I want to include all my libraries here, right? So this is going to be my setup, and this is going to be, let's name this chunk libraries. And let's say I want a library tidyverse. Now tidyverse is great because it tells you all kinds of stuff that it does when it loads up. Let's see what happens when I include it in my Markdown document. Oh look, the start of my document is now all of the tidyverse warnings and messages, right? That sucks. Why don't we change that? So instead of just echo equals F, I'm also going to say warning equals F, message equals F. And that's going to suppress all of the warning messages, all of the warnings that R might give me, and in addition to all of just the status messages it might give me. Let's reknit this and see what happens. Cool. Now that tidyverse garbage is gone. Now I set that as a global option for the whole document, right? So now every code chunk I run is going to have these flags in effect. Now this is the same thing as doing this on every single code chunk, right? I can add options to each of my code chunk to specify what I want it to do. Some of those options include echo, warning, message. Here you see that I have include equals false. Include equals false means run this in the background, but do not put anything of its output on the screen, right? Like run it. I definitely want you to run it, and I want it to be in the environment. But include means, don't show me what you did. Like if I ran summary or plot, don't put those plots or summary output into the document. Run it. And so in this case, it's going to set these options, but it's going to provide no output onto the screen. And sometimes that's what I want, right? Notice in this file, which is an actual working file, I have a whole lot of setup stuff going on in this code chunk, right? I'm purging my environment. I'm setting my global options. I'm including all my libraries. I'm sourcing an external file, and I'm reading in a bunch of data, right? So this has to be there for my code to work, but I definitely don't want it to be anywhere near the final document, right? I just want it to be in the environment for the code I'm going to run later. Okay, so common chunk options you're going to use. So global, I think this is a good default to have. Echo equals false, warning equals false, message equals false. You'll see that's what I did here. Echo, warning, message equals false, right? I don't want my code to be putting random stuff in my document. Those are good global options to work with. In this case, that's redundant because it's already set globally here, right? So every code chunk is going to have those options triggered. I'll show you a few other code chunk options that are really common later, but I just want we have when we run chunk in our code in our Markdown, we have both these kind of chunk options, we have global options, and I just want to get our kind of heads around what those two things are as we get going. Okay, so questions about chunk options to get started. We've seen these before, right? Another common one I've shown you is cache, right? That you could set cache equals true. If you have like an MC model that you're running or some other long running process, what cache will do is it'll actually write a folder to your hard drive that's in the root directory you're in that stores output. That it basically saves the output of whatever chunk of code it's in onto your hard disk. So instead of re-executing it, it'll just pull it off the hard disk for future runs of the init. So outline today. First, we're going to do a review of the cheat sheet for our Markdown, and then we'll go through inline R after that. Okay. Also, these are kind of cool, like iterate. Ooh, that's not great though. I usually use PDF for my slides. There are cool. This is HTML. Notice, right? So I'm actually just in Chrome right now to display my slides. We'll kind of cover more on the slide stuff in a second. And I was playing with the iterated, kind of sequentially revealed features. But this is our outline for the day, right? We're going to do the cheat sheet. We're going to do inline R. We're going to do math. We're going to show you how to use LaTeX to compile your documents. We're going to show you how to do graphics in a more sophisticated way and tables in a prettier way. I'll also show you how to do citations and bibliographies, how to do some basics on slides, and then I'm going to show you an advanced package called Bookdown that allows us to do things like cross-referencing and automatically generating cross-references, which is a really handy thing. Okay, so the cheat sheet. And again, please do cut me off at any point if you have questions. Remember, we can go to RStudio Help and we get all these cheat sheets. Right? One of them is the RMarkdown cheat sheet, which is quite handy. So let's kind of review this really quick. It's going to download the PDF to my machine, and there it is. Okay, so first, we know the workflow stuff. We're not going to mess with publishing too much, and we're not going to directly render. We're just typically going to use init for that. Okay, sorry, I have all of your lovely faces over the right side of my screen right now, so go away. So some of you have noticed this YAML header, right? This header at the top of a Markdown file. And it's a little bit funky. But what we can do is this block of code right here is called a YAML header. And I don't actually know what YAML stands for. But it is marked off by three hyphens on the top and bottom. So that declares to the document, and it goes at the top. And so this declares to the document basically global parameters that Pandoc, remember Pandoc is the kind of engine that's turning our Markdown into something else. These are the parameters that Pandoc is going to use to format things. And it's also how we're going to tell it what output we want. So in this case, I have a title, right? So title appeared here, right? And it's offset with a larger font size. Author is also offset, and the date is also there, right? So all those have special features. So we can make this my cool title, semicolon, subtitle. I can add a subtitle if I want. A meditation on being. Okay, and now I have a subtitle, and that's pretty cool. And then there's my name, right? And then there's the date. So I can there's a fancy way where I can actually use the system date, so it's dynamic and it'll give me the current date rather than just manually typing the date. But I've also replaced the date field in the past and just made it Rutgers, right? If I want it to be an affiliation instead, because it's always going to put date right there. So I can, kind of use the date field to put other things in there if I want, because it's just text. Now output controls what it's going to be, right? So in this case, it's going to be an HTML document, but I could switch it to PDF document. And now Pandoc knows that it should run it through LaTeX instead of producing an HTML output, right? So it's going to produce this as a PDF document. You can see this Pandoc command come up here. That's actually, it's telling us what it's doing behind the scenes. And if you want to get fancy, you can do this by hand too. Now notice also that this takes a little more time because the LaTeX engine to compile takes a little time. But again, we're going to stick with HTML. And it's a good idea to just work in HTML because it's faster. And then if your target is to produce a PDF at the end, then you can just run that once at the end. But this is what the PDF output looks like, right? And this is a lot prettier. And this is, certainly what I would want to distribute once I'm done. But you saw that took 45 seconds to compile. But once I switch it back to HTML, it'll be done more or less immediately. So the HTML is a little easier to work with as you're developing. Anyway, YAML has a lot of things we can add to it. Eventually, we're going to put bibliography stuff in there. We're going to leave it alone for now, though. But that's what the YAML header is. Interactives, you can go Shiny if you want. Again, Shiny is going to be beyond the scope for our class. But if you did want something like clickable, where you could manipulate things within the document, then check out Shiny. Here's a whole list of chunk options, right? I showed you cache, showed you warning, showed you message isn't in here, echo is in here, include I showed you. But these are some of the common chunk options that you could use, right? Where we just put those, basically the chunk options are here, right? So first we tell it what language we're using. We're using R. But you can use like Python, or you can use Stan, or you can use other languages in here, right? You can use C++, I think. So you have to tell it what language you're using within the code chunk. And then we tell it the name of the chunk, and then we give it a comma. So we do language, space, name, and name is optional, right? So if I do R libraries, comma options, ... right? That's fine. But I don't need to name it. I could just do R comma include equals F, right? Or I could do R libraries include equals F. The name is totally optional, but if you're working in a long document, it can help you to sort things. Okay. So those are the chunk options that are really common. And again, like go back to this cheat sheet later and work through it. But we have a lot of things we can do with the chunks. We can tidy the results. We're going to use the results flag later too. And I think I've shown some of you the fig.height, fig.width, but I'll show you those later too, where we can format the size of our images and plots. Okay, so here's Markdown formatting, right? You know that we can use the # to give different levels of text. So here, the 2 is a level 2 header, right? Which in Word, not enough people I think this also helps you think about the structure of your documents really nicely. right? A lot of times, I don't know how many of you do this. It's certainly how I used to write. I would be like, uh, I'd just do like bold, and then I would go like bold, and I don't know, let's say 14 point, section one, and then I would change it back, unbold, right? This is a section that I'm writing, right? What we should have been doing all along is using built-in styles, right? And we should have been doing, this is a section header, right? Because our Word knows that that's heading one, right? And it has different styles for heading two, heading three, heading four, right? And then this is normal text. But the problem is, right? So like that's how Word wants you to organize documents, and then you could globally change the styles. But no one actually writes like this in Word, and so it makes the whole thing a headache, right? So what we can do now in our Markdown is it actually just makes the organization to me a little more intuitive, where I can say this is a big section. We'll call this like section one, right? Section one, part one. And then I could do three for section one, part one, sub part one, right? And what that's going to give me are these nested headers, right? And I think I can go down 4 or 5 levels with that. And the other thing it's going to do is, how do I turn on a table of contents? TOC. Where are you, TOC? Well, we can turn on a table of contents pretty easily. The other thing is when don't be afraid to just go Google it, right? HTML document, you can add a table of contents this way, right? So in our YAML headers, this is just this is the documentation for Bookdown, but that's okay. So notice that there's a tab between options. So I have output, enter, tab for these sub parameters. But let's copy this block of code into my YAML header just to see what it looks like. Now, because I have a structure to it, notice that I can populate a table of contents at the beginning of my document automatically, right? Because that structure actually has meaning. And I told it depth equals 2. If I tell it depth equals 3, it'll go down and give me that sub part, right? So now it's got 3 blocks on it. So this can be really nice if you are, I don't know, writing a dissertation, right? That you could automatically populate tables of contents. Or for example, in the report demo I'm going to show you, I used RMarkdown to produce this report, right? And it generated this table of contents automatically, right? And that looks pretty darn nice. And this looked professional enough for me to send to a funder without doing anything else, right? I just wrote this up in RMarkdown and sent it to a funder. And it's also hyperlinked in here, right? So I can click that and go to section 9, which is nice. Okay. I think I'm selling this too hard. I'm gonna let's see what else is in the cheat sheet that we need to work through. I don't think there's anything else in here. We'll do the citations and bibliographies in a sec. But all the formatting stuff is really cool. We know about bulleted lists, right? So today I did this greater than minus sign to do a bulleted list. But to make on slides, right, double pound sign hashtag gives me a new subsection. In slides, it gives me a new slide, right? One will give me a section. This is a section break. This is a slide. And then I can do a bullet list. Bullet 1, paragraph 2, spelling stinks. Okay. So I'm going to render, right? There's my section break. That's a nice dramatic pause, right? And then there's my bullets. Cool. yeah, I'm going to close this now and we're going to get back to what I wanted to talk about. So inline R.
One question about that. I was thinking this might be silly, but in case and this in the presentation, maybe the format comes predetermined with the type of bullets you want. But if you want, for example, different type of bullets when you are writing the markdown, are there different options? You have to download special packages or how it works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You don't want a bullet but an arrow or something like that. I don't know.
An arrow, tough. I don't know. I
No,
think
maybe I don't know. Just different, not dots, but maybe just a line or something different. I don't know.
yeah.
Is that a thing
So no,
or is just
it is possible. You so a lot of times you're stuck. Well, so there's we can do sub bullet lists pretty easily, right? I think is it just a simple tab or is it actually? So we could do like sub lists. I think maybe I need to break that off. I think it needs a space between it for that to work. Um, well, that's not working right, but I could mess with it. Yeah. So you can change things when we're in the HTML environment, which this is. You can actually use CSS, which is style sheets that you can use to format HTML. So it means writing more code. So the downside is in Word, I can be like change it to this other funky thing easily. In the Markdown environment where we're doing plain text, where there's not like an arrow, then it takes a little more work to make it turn into exactly what you want. The other option you have is to just make the graphic and bring the graphic in. So yeah, that's a little trickier. You can do nested bullet point lists. I'm not remembering exactly off the top of my head. I'd have to Google it to figure it out. But I think
yeah, that's fine.
nested
Yeah.
bullets, RMD, incremental nested lists in our Markdown, right? Oh yeah, it's plus. So we could do star, and then do we need to do four space rule? Okay, so if I do this and then, so spaces have special meaning in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, mess with it later. But nonetheless, yeah, you can customize it. You get less flexibility here in terms of presentation than you do in a tool like PowerPoint or Word. That's the trade-off, right? The trade-off is that you get more reliability in terms of what it looks like, but it's a little harder to futz with the formatting unless you want to write more code. But there are a lot of like themes and different packages you can use. So all that is to say, uh, you lose some of the nice features you get in something like PowerPoint, but I think you gain in terms of the focus on the content. Okay, so inline R. Let's make some R code. Okay, so inline R. Now I will show you how to make R code work in your documents. Demo. Okay, so we can do a chunk, right? And I did Command Option I to put a chunk in. And so we could do 2 plus 2 equals 4, and that'll kind of be broken off apart from the text, right? And it'll give me 4 as output. But what if I wanted to say, for example, I wanted that to be like verbose inside of a sentence, right? I know that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, right? So what I can do is I can use this special notation of a single tick, specify the programming language, and then put some code there. And then it'll render whatever that output is inside my document itself. So in this case, I said 2 plus 2 equals 4, and it spit out 4. Or I could put it inline and get that number back out. Now this seems a little silly, but let's say that I am working with the Gapminder data, right? And let's say that I want to know what the correlation is between GDP and life expectancy, right? So let's remind myself what gapminder looks like. Now, that is something that I often would want to write up in a report, right? So I could do something like core GDP. I could define an object in my code as the correlation of, well, we'll do, core gapminder, $, gapminder GDP. And we'll do the log because that is a exponential variable. Okay, and so that's 0.086, right? Now, I could say I also know that the correlation of life expectancy with log GDP is R core GDP life lift XP, right? And now what it's going to do is it's going to go grab that variable I defined elsewhere and put it right in my document. Now, if I'm writing up a report, I can always copy and paste stuff, but what if I do a different transformation on the variable? Or what if I get new data, right? Those numbers change all the time, and it's really easy to overlook that as you're editing a document, right? So let's say I made a mistake in my initial coding, and the results turned out differently when I reran my code. Now, ordinarily, I'd have to go hunt for each time that I called out a number in the text and update it. But if I do it this way, the numbers are automatically going to update every time I change my code, right? The other thing I could do is I called an object there, but there's no reason I can't just put this whole command in my code right here, right? That'll do the same thing. So we get the correlation there. But that's still pretty ugly, right? That's way too many digits that I would want typically reported out in a paper. So what if instead I rounded it? I'm going to round that to 2 significant digits. And now I get 0.81, right? And that's cool. That's the sort of thing I totally want to do in a paper all the time. I want to run a model, and then I want to say, okay, my model said that, the relationship between life expectancy and GDP on average is this, right? Well, there it is. I've reported it now. Period. That is a high correlation. Okay, so inline R code is super handy for that. Now let's say that I ran a regression model, right? And let's say that I ran a regression model with these two outcomes. So let's call it model 0, and I'm just going to use LM here to keep things simple. And let's say my outcome is life expectancy, and my predictor is log GDP per cap. Data equals gapminder, right? Okay, now I have within this object an intercept and a coefficient. So maybe I want to say something like on average, for every 1 unit increase in log GDP per capita, we expect to see, that's kind of redundant with on average, our results suggest that life expectancy will increase by beta, right? It'll increase by beta on average, according to this model, right? The correlation. So I want to put beta in my text, and ordinarily I'd go look it up and I'd say 8.4. Do I round that? Yeah, okay, 1. But I'm making a lot of decisions there. Maybe I rounded wrong. All kinds of weird stuff can happen. So I could put 8.41 in there, or I could do R coef M0. I think I want, so here's what coef does, if you haven't seen the function before, is it pulls those two elements out, and they're named numbers, right? And I want the second element of this output. I can always just highlight my code to run it in the console to just this is something I'll do to make sure that I'm writing the right command and I'm getting the right output for what I want. But in this case, I ran my model, I'm running coef, and there it is, right? That's great. There's my beta. That's what I typically want to report. But again, ugly, right? So let's round it. Wrap it in a round, and there we go, 8.41. Cool, right? Now that makes my writing up results a whole heck of a lot easier because now I don't need to worry about copying and pasting things appropriately. I don't need to worry about what if I change my model specification and the beta moves around, which it will. Now it's going to dynamically update, right? Which is great. So inline R code is awesome for this kind of application. Any questions on how to use this? No? We good? Okay.
You can also do equations in inline R code as well.
Equation.
I figured that. Like if you're representing like your model, like beta plus alpha plus.
You're asking about math. So let's move to math, right? Yes. So math is next on my list. So yeah, I could say, let's say I wanted to specify my regression model before I did this. So that's not, you can do it not with R code, but we're actually going to use LaTeX code, right? So you've seen me write code for math before, but how we do it is we wrap it in $2 signs. And those dollar signs tell RMarkdown and tell LaTeX too, what's going to happen here is what's called math mode, right? Math mode is a special way of writing math equations that is used in LaTeX, but it's also used in various web formats. There's MathJax. The Wikipedia has one that follows the LaTeX syntax. So this is a really common way to write math. But we could say that our model is that life expectancy sub I, so the little underscore tells it to turn into a subscript, right? So here, life expectancy sub I gets written out like that. But let's say maybe I wanted to write life expectancy squared sub I, right? The caret gives us a superscript and the underscore gives us a subscript. But what if I wanted to make it life expectancy sub country? I need to wrap that in curly braces, right? So I can do the subscript, and then it's going to say whatever comes after this is going to be subscript. But if I don't wrap it in curly braces, it's going to look kind of funny, right? It's going to put the C in the subscript, but the untry outside of the subscript. So if I want the whole thing to be a subscript, I need curly braces around it. Do you see the preview that it's rendering here? RMarkdown's nice because it'll preview your math, right? Now, maybe I don't want my life expectancy to be in italics like that. Maybe I want it to just render in regular format. I'm going to give a LaTeX command to tell it to do that. It's called text SF. And text SF means use the system font. Now it's going to render in whatever the font is that it's using for the rest of the document. If I wanted it to be Roman, like Times New Roman, I can use RM to give it the serifs, right? But text SF or text RM will make it so it's not in the like math italics. Okay, so text SF, we'll do SF, I like SF. Life expectancy of a country is equal to, and I'll just turn this back into I, because typically we don't want to use lots of words in our notation, right? Is equal to alpha, which is going to be our intercept. Now to do Greek, right? So there are special commands to render Greek letters. Slash alpha will give me little alpha. Slash capital alpha, well, that won't render, but that gives me a lowercase alpha. Okay? Plus slash beta will render beta, right? I don't have to like punch through the word like thing to find my Greek characters anymore. I just type slash beta and there it is. And then let's say times x sub I, right? Alpha plus beta times x sub I. That's my typical regression model, right? Which I could easily just make y sub I equals alpha plus beta times x sub I. The times isn't really necessary here. Notice I don't want to just put like x or star. I want it to be the mathematical operator times. right? It's, implicit if I just do beta xi. That's fine. And maybe I'm writing it out with, the old school regression language where I want to include the error term. There's my epsilon. But sometimes you notice that there's like the curvy epsilon. I like that one. In LaTeX, that's called var epsilon, the variable epsilon. So you can Google like LaTeX Greek, and it'll give you the whole list of the Greek alphabet and how to get it. Now, that's pretty cool, right? That's a regression model, no problem. Oh yeah, but remember that we logged this, so it's beta xi here, but we could also do beta log xi, right? And I did a slash in front of log so that log didn't render with italics. Log is special, right? If I remove the slash, it's going to be italicized, which is fine, but it's not supposed to be italicized as an operator. So that's nice, right? Now, what if, so the $2 sign method is going to create a new line. Let's render this and see what it looks like. It's going to create a new line that's centered and formatted, where that's going to be offset from the text. What if I want that equation to be inline, right? Let's say this, in this case, I think that x squared, or let's say sqrt x is a better transformation. So if I use the single dollar sign, it's going to put my math equation in the sentence itself. It's not going to start a new line. So here, I get the square root of x in my sentence instead of broken off, right? If I wrap that in $2, it's going to break off, and this is going to be funky looking. Right, now I get that kind of broken off. I think that square root x is a better transformation. So sometimes I want it in line, sometimes I don't. Notice with square root, sometimes this is a special operator that is going to wrap that upper square root bar over whatever's inside the equation. So those need to go in the curly braces, right? So maybe in this case I said square root x, but maybe it's square root x plus 2 squared plus pi or something, right? And it's going to extend that square root bar over everything inside of those curly braces. The other times you might see something like that, but what if I want a fraction? I love fractions. Fractions are cool. Let's do a fraction. We use slash frac, and we need a numerator and a denominator. So notice I put 2 sets of curly braces where I'll put 1 and 2, right? That's pretty cool. There's a fraction. What else can we do? What other questions do y'all have about things you might want to do with math? Or exponents, right? We could do e to the 2x plus 9y squared or something like that, right? So I can put equations inside of exponents pretty easily. Let's say I need to do a summation or summations. Here, let's do that as a new line. And let's do sum. Summations are kind of tricky because, oftentimes we'll have a starting index and a finishing index, and the same could be true of integrals, right? So I'm going to need a subscript where I'll say I equals 0 and a superscript that says 10, right? And then my sum will be inside of that. And we'll say 2i, right? So that's going to sum from I equals 0 to 10, 2 times I, right? And so that's an easy way to do summations. I could, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I could turn that into an integral with slash int. There's the integral notation, right? Typically, we're not going to use that as often here, but summation is pretty common. Okay, so summation. Math mode, it can get hairy, but all the equations I've written, I've done in math mode. So if you see an equation that you want to reproduce, go check out my Markdown code, and you can just copy and paste it and modify it as you need to. It'll take some learning to get your head around how it works, but this is a really common way to write math. And if you work with me on research, you'll get irritated when I start to write LaTeX math in my emails to you when I'm explaining models I'm writing. But it's like it becomes the most compact way for you to describe a mathematical process, a statistical model, any of that stuff, right? So I think learning it is worthwhile. But this is, the extent of most of what we need to do, right? I could define a model really easily as here's a Bayesian model as for our life expectancy model, yi. Now I need to do sim to give me the tilde. That means distributed, so that's just called /sim in LaTeX, the tilde. And we'll say normal, mu, sigma, right? Now, maybe I don't want my normal to be italicized. And you'll notice in my code on lazy days, it's italicized, and on not lazy days, it's not italicized, depending on how much code I wanted to write. But I can do text RM to make it capital, not to make it unitalicized, right? So there's line 1. And next I need my linear equation, right? And I'm going to say slash mu sub I equals alpha plus beta x sub I. And then I need my priors, right? So I'm going to say alpha is distributed text RM normal 0, 1. Now we made it 2. We'll just stick with that, right? And so we can see that I'm getting every line of my model that I need. We're going to say sigma is distributed exponential 1. Okay, so if you've ever wondered about how to write up your models in a compact way for a paper, there it is, right? I think that's all you need to see for math mode for now. Are there any questions on that? We good? Okay, math mode, super cool. It's something I strongly recommend you getting your head around. The other thing, I think it's LaTeX equation editor. There is like there's a bunch of them, but there's like different ways you could type your equation here. It'll you can kind of manipulate it, right? Where I could say sigma, I don't know, imath, whatever, and it'll render it for you, right? And then you could copy that as an image if you need some experimentation with it. If you just Google online LaTeX equation editor, you can poke around there. But our Markdown in our studio are great in that it will give you these inline previews, so you know it's working right. Sometimes your document, when you're getting in math mode, you're going to screw it up and the Markdown render will fail. And hopefully it'll give you a clear enough message that the problem was your math, right? And if you find that's the case, you can either debug the math or you can just kind of delete it and see if it'll render without it. But the kind of stuff we're going to do is pretty simple, typically, things like this. So that shouldn't be too tricky to get your head around. Sometimes you'll see this $2 notation. That's the same thing as this notation, with the slash open square bracket, 2 plus 2. It renders the same. This is typically what you see in like RMarkdown, and this is typically what you see in LaTeX, but it'll do the same thing. It'll break it off from the line. That's the kind of new line formatting. Okay, math. Tiny Tech and LaTeX. Okay, so to render documents in PDF, you need the LaTeX engine. So LaTeX math mode you can do fine without LaTeX installed on your computer. HTML understands LaTeX and it'll render it. But what you can't do is render the pretty looking PDF report documents or book documents or slide documents or those kinds of things. For that, we need a LaTeX compiler. Now, some of you might have installed TeX or something like that, but we can also use the Tiny Tech package, which is pretty cool. And I'm still kind of learning how this works. But you can install .packages Tiny Tech. I know it says text, but it's tech. So no, I'm not going to restart R. But if you haven't installed this package, do so now if you want to follow along. And then from there, I need to run one more command. I need to run so I need to library tinytech in, and then I need to run install tinytech. Yeah, I know. You're unhappy with me. That's okay. It's because I reloaded things. And if I run install tinytech, which I'm not going to do, it will go get an installation of LaTeX for your computer and install it in a way that RMarkdown. I'll run it. Let's see what happens. It'll take a second to run because it's going to download a couple hundred megabytes of data and install something. But yeah, my computer's not happy with me right now. But you can see it's going and downloading the LaTeX installer for me right now. So I'm going to just put this, I'm going to upload this demo when we're done. Install tinytech to compile LaTeX. And I'm going to put eval equals, is it eval? Yeah, eval equals false means don't run this on my computer. But I'm going to do library install.packages tinytech library tinytech install tinytech. And if you run those 3 lines of code, you will have LaTeX on your computer, right? And then you just need to, and our Studio and RMarkdown will handle the rest for you. You can see now my computer is downloading a ton of stuff, and that'll take a while to run the first time, but you only need to install it once, and then it'll stay updated after that. If you have TechLive or something like that installed, it's fine, and you don't need to go through this step. But if you don't, you do. So, any questions about that? It's pretty cool. That's so tinytech is built by Yihui. I blanking on his last name right now, but he is on the RMarkdown development team and has built out a lot of really cool stuff for RMarkdown. So tinytech was his answer to sort of how to make the LaTeX compilation stuff as easy as possible within our Studio and RMarkdown. Are we crashing? We might be crashing. Yes. Yes. Might have to force quit. Too many installs going. All right. Anyway, okay, so we did tinytech. Now some advanced graphics stuff. We're kind of blazing through this. I may do a second session on some of this stuff because this, especially the citations, might get a little beyond us today, but that's okay. So there we are back in our demo. That's okay. And let's make sure this is in here for those who weren't able to. Install. Okay, so if you run those, you'll get the installer. Okay, so next we are doing graphics, right? So for Gapminder, we know that we can embed graphics really easily, right? So we could do like ggplot. Make sure Gapminder was libraried in earlier. All right. So I'm keeping my environment. Obviously, whatever happens above in the Markdown script is going to get included, but I want to, code live too. Gapminder as x equals log GDP per GDP per cap, and y equals life expectancy, and let's just do a scatter plot, right? Geom point. Now we know what that's going to show us. Right. Library tidyverse in yet? That's okay. Okay, so we're going to get our scatter plot over here, right? And we know that if we just render this document, now that plot will show up in our document, which is great. But whoa, that's huge. What if I want a tiny plot, right? Well, I could do fig dot height equals 1. And then it's going to get very, very short, but very long. That's not especially attractive. Maybe I want fig dot width to also be 1. Right? Now it's going to be a very, very small plot. That's also not very attractive. Maybe I want it to be something more reasonable, like 3. Maybe I want a square that's 3 wide on each side. And you say 3 what you say? 3 3 like, 1 is small, 3 is less small, 7 is big, right? It's not really a precise unit. But there. Now that's a nice kind of medium-sized plot. Maybe I want it in the middle. I think I can do fig dot align equals C. There's a way to center it. We could mess with that. That's all in the cheat sheet if we want to figure out alignments. But one cool thing I can do is give it a caption, a scatter plot. And this is going to come in really handy later when we get to cross-referencing. Right, there's the scatter plot. Now that doesn't look great now, but what I can do is I can use that fig.cap argument to eventually do things like this. Get a numbered and captioned figure caption that I can then do things like cross-reference, right? So in this document, what you're not seeing is that when I have figure 6 called out right here, figure 6 is not actually written in my Markdown script, right? So it's figure 6 panel A shows the lifetime risk of ever being placed. So I'm just going to find that part of that document real quick so you can see it. Oops. Now notice here, I don't say figure 6 in my text. I say figure reference fig ICWA, right? Now, the way that works is I named my code chunk ICWA, and I gave it a caption. So now our Markdown knows that this is a figure, and it knows that its name is ICWA, right? So when I call it out in the text, I can reference the figure, and whatever number the LaTeX gives it when it compiles it now gets kind of turned into a cross-reference that I can use code to make sure I'm calling out the right figure. So like if I rearrange things in the document and figure 6 is now figure 4, that's automatically going to be taken care of, and I don't need to worry about keeping those numbers in order. I can also make a table of contents for figures and tables too. If that's kind of where we're building to with using things like fig.cap. Because I could also, instead of doing like fig.cap, obviously I could do like a GG title, right? My cool plot. And that will give me a caption. But notice now that's part of the image. It's not text, right? If I do a fig.cap, it's text. Okay. So that's graphics. The other thing we can do is we can bring in graphics from elsewhere, right? So let's say that I have a image stored on my computer that, for example, here, you'll notice I actually am building those out here. But let's say, I don't know, let's go download a puppy. All right, puppy, image. Someone tell me which puppy to download. Man, I don't know. I'm gonna go with this one. Okay, so give me the image. Let's save image as, and let's put it in lab because this is really important content for teaching. Save. Okay, so that was called shelterdogcropped.jpg, right? So now I could do a couple things. I can include graphics. Okay. So now I can Google, so if you Google RMarkdown, including graphics, there's a code for it that is, I think, something like this, where I would put the name of the file there. It's like exclamation point bracket parentheses. There's also an include graphics code we could use. Typically, you're going to embed graphics this way, but there are ways to have a file and then to pull that file in. What I'll often do is actually just write LaTeX code using include graphics and then the file name. So in this case, the file name is sheltered dog cropped 1.jpg. I forget if that needs to be in quotation marks or not. It did. Yeah, it's not working, but I'm not going to mess with that for now. Oh yeah, I'm not in LaTeX. I'm in HTML, so it's not going to work. Okay, all that. Now, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. This is a little more on the fly than I might have liked, but here we go. Kind of. Hopefully, this is helpful for everybody. So I showed you how to install TinyTech. Right now, you know that I can do things like change HTML document to PDF document, right? Let's change PDF. If you have LaTeX correctly installed, this will render, and you shouldn't have to do anything else. It should just compile on its own. We're still going to get that table of contents with that much depth on it. It's going to take a second more because it's got to go through the LaTeX engine, and I might have screwed up my install by aborting that last TinyTech install. Hopefully I didn't. But it's downloading a couple packages that it says it needs from TLNGR. That's just a package manager for LaTeX, and that's okay. It's downloading some fonts right now, but once it gets done with that, it'll render. Yeah, tables. Tables are important. So let's do tables. We'll see what this looks like once it's done. Okay, so maybe I want to like a table in Markdown, right? So maybe I want to talk about, remember I ran my regression model earlier, right? Where's my regression model? Here it is. Okay, so I have M0 right there, right? So, you know, there's no reason I couldn't put this directly in my document. And is Markdown still running? Yeah. We'll see what that looks like in a second. But I can make it prettier because, right, what that's going to do is it's going to be an offset kind of block of code. It's not going to look too great. It's going to just be code output. It's going to look like this, but rendered into my document. Maybe I want it to look a little prettier than that. I want to use the cable package, which I believe is installed for me. No? So if not, we're going to install packages, cable. There's a bunch of packages that handle making LaTeX and Markdown. Is it with the capital? Hmm. Oh, it's in knitter. Okay, sorry. Not a pack. Library knitter. And knitter is the engine behind RMarkdown in terms of rendering it. That kind of talks to Pandoc. So what we could do is we could cable a table. So cable, what it's going to do is it's going to take a output and turn it into pretty Markdown. So it can't coerce that, but what it can do is it can coerce a coef table, right?
Is this similar to what we were using Pander last time?
Yeah, same idea. Cable is just the knitter version. Pander is another package that can do something similar. Other packages people might show you are TechReg and Stargazer. Those do similar things. But cable is a nice one. Now we can see this is kind of laid out as if it were Markdown. Now if I just, and my RMarkdown is being slow as sin. And this is another reason to keep everything in HTML until you're ready to Pander, so with an ER, not pandas like Python. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to switch back to HTML just for the meantime because I don't actually want to install all of these LaTeX packages while you all wait. But let's kind of take a look at this. So Cable gave us a relatively nicer looking table than this. Okay, it's not quite there though. The nicest way to present regression output to also use the Broom package, which is a tidyverse package. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sweep rather, model 0 into a tidy data frame, right? I need to sweep the summary. I forget how to do this sometimes. No, it's tidy. I'm sorry. It's not sweep. That's something else. There we go. It's tidy M0. So if if I just run tidy M0, let's see what I get. That's going to give me this output here, right? Which is not especially attractive. That's ugly. Can we do better? Okay, so now if I table my tidy, let's see what happens. It's not going to work, but I'm going to show you how to fix it. Oh, it did work. It rendered it. If I'm in PDF, it won't work. You'll have to do something else. You'll need to give it a results equals as is flag. So it doesn't just print out the markdown because it needs to go through 2 levels. Typically when I'm making tables, make sure to include the results equals as is chunk option, especially if you're in PDF. Otherwise, it's not going to render appropriately because it's just going to stay as index. But okay, so let's see what this actually does. Right, that is actually how you could manually write a table in Markdown. Right, so if I just paste that text there, I'm going to get 2 versions of the table. I'm going to get the version that came out from my code, and then I'm going to get a second one that's exactly the same as the one that I provided through code directly above. Right now, again, rounding, right? I usually don't want to put 12 digits in my documents, so let's round it. I can wrap the whole thing in it. No, I can't. There's a way to do rounding with tidy. I won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but there's a way to do it. Another way that people, I'm not in LaTeX, so I can't do tech reg, but using cable is a nice way to do it. Now, there's no reason I couldn't format this myself, right? Where I could say, common way to do this would be to take like Gapminder, right? And let's say I want to make a new table that has like my by continent average life expectancy. So let's do a nice descriptive statistics table. We'll take Gapminder. We will group by continent. We will summarize. And here I'm going to use a descriptive name, life expectancy, because it's going to be a table caption, right? So I want it to look nice. Equals mean life exp. And let's do GDP per, because I'm putting spaces in it, right? That's why I'm wrapping it in quotations so that it will understand that that's actually the name of the variable that I'm creating. So we're going to call this tab out. It's going to be this table, which is going to, look like this in R. But when I render it into my Markdown document, it's going to look pretty nice. Okay, and so that's what the table looks like there. Now I can manually specify the labels within the cable function. I could go in and do rounding if I need to, but it's a nice way to render a table that then this is also, there's ways to take this and import it into Excel if you want to do that, right? Because it's HTML now, it's an HTML table, and that can move into Excel or Word pretty easily. Which, by the way, right, if you ever do need to, this was called demo2, right? And we're at demo2.html. Did you know that I could just open this with Word? I'm getting a thunderstorm here now. It's kind of cool. Look, I can open it with Word. I mean, the downside is that my math doesn't render, but my plots are there, and my tables are now Word tables that I could copy and paste wherever I want. Okay. So we got a couple more things to get through. I'm not going to get through everything today. I apologize. Slides I feel good on. Do you want, let's cover citations really quick. Is that okay? We can spend the last 15 minutes on citations. Is that good? What other RMarkdown topics are you itching to cover before we wrap this? Are there any others? Are you just exhausted about hearing about RMarkdown at this point? That's okay too. No?
In the citations part, would it differ if you're using a different type of reference manager every time? Like well, I use Zotero, and then is that related to that or
Yep.
not?
Yep.
Or
I'm going to
would
show
it
you.
be-
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to show you how to make Zotero and RMarkdown play together.
Excellent.
Okay, so we're going to do citations. Okay, so for those of you who are not in the know, Zotero is my best friend. So Zotero is a reference manager that is free and open source. I'm just going to put the link in here. It's built out by MIT. It's a great resource. And it has a variety of citation data, right? You can see I've got, I don't know how many thousands of things in my Zotero library. It's basically everything I've ever read as a grad student or faculty member. I try to clean it up once in a while. But, the thing I do with my workflow is you can see I have a working papers folder, right? And then within my working papers, I have the various papers that I'm currently working on. And then I have all the citations that I've so far identified for that project, right? My race and child welfare folder is massive. But so let's say that I'm working on a project. I'm not going to do a full tutorial for Zotero right now, but we'll assume that you're working with it. And I'll also show you how to do this without Zotero. But let's say that I'm working on this project. Now, each of these entries in here has a attached set of bibliographic information. Sorry, as I kind of maneuver my screen around, I can't actually see it on my screen right now because your lovely faces are hiding it. But it has a title, it has authors, it has a publication, it has a volume number, an issue number, all these things that we typically want in a bibliography. You'll also notice that it has a citation key. And I use a package to go along with it called Better BibTech that I recommend if you're going to go down this rabbit hole with me. You should download and install. It's also free. If you Google Better BibTech Zotero, you'll get it. And what it does is it keeps those citation keys nice and clean. Now, what I can do if I'm in Zotero is I can right-click on my folder and I can export my collection. And I want to export it using Better BibTech or just regular BibTech. That's fine too. And what it's going to do is it's going to create what's called a .bib file that's named after the folder. So I'm going to put this .bib file in my folder that I'm writing my RMarkdown document in. Okay, and we're going to call it bib demo.bib. Okay, now what that's going to do is it's going to create a bibliography file for me, and it's a plain text document. Notice the theme. Everything is plain text, right? Plain text is wonderful. So I'm going to open it with my favorite text editor called Sublime. And each of these will then export all of the fields into this format called BibTech, which is a database format that we can use to archive citations. You'll notice that we have this at article tells it this is a journal article, so use whatever journal article format you're in. This is my citation key for it. Then it has fields like title, author, year, month, abstract, all these other things, right? But it has every source that was in that folder now is in this .bib file. So let's say I want to reference something. I can input a field called bibliography, and I can call it bibdemo.bib. Okay. Now, does that need to be wrapped in quotes? Why not? I think this is on the cheat sheet, so let's just take a look to confirm I'm doing it the correct way. Again, no harm in looking at the help files all the time, right? We all forget how to do this stuff. So bibliographies are down here.
Sorry, the name should be the same name as how you name the file when you saved it in your folder?
It's just pointing it to the file that has my bibtech entry in it. Okay, now I'll show you how to make one manually, but you want that. Basically, I'm going to put two things to make my bibliography. I'm going to put my bibliography file, which is my bib demo, and I don't need quotes on that. So bib demo is there, and typically I'm not going to. And typically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a CSL file, and a CSL file is a citation style language file, right? And Zotero actually comes along with a lot of these. But let's say, I don't know, someone tell me your favorite citation style.
ASA.
ASA. I like ASA. So Zotero actually has a style repository. If you do Zotero CSL database, you'll get right there, the Zotero style repository. They have a ton of CSL files. So I could do American Sociological Association 6th edition. I just click that. And in this case, I actually want to just save it. So I'm going to right click and save link as. And that gives me American Sociological Association.csl, which, guess what, is another plain text file that tells it how to format citations appropriately for that style. So I do cite CSL, American Social, whatever the file name is, right? Where'd I put it there? So I'm just going to copy and paste that file name over. .csl. Okay, so I told it where my bibliography is, and I told it where my citation style is. It has some built-in citation styles, and you're welcome to mess around with those. But typically, like whoever you're writing with or whatever journal you're writing for has a style. And it turns out that just about every journal style in the world is in here, right? So, Journal of Quantitative Criminology style guide is in here, right? What, obviously things like Chicago style are in here, 40 different versions of it. So this is a great way, whatever citation style you need, just go get the citation style file and then put it in your directory and it'll render automatically. Now, so I always forget how to do this, so I'm going to remind myself. Here we go. Pretty easy. Check it out. So to reference something, okay, so we'll do citations. Get your .bib file and .csl file in order in the same directory and put them in the YAML header. Okay, then cite your sources. And who told me to do that? Well, I do an open bracket, I do @ and then I need to tab over. What I'll typically do is keep my bib file open in one place for me to just quick search. And let's say I want to cite this paper. I'm going to copy that index, put it in there, and then I'm going to add a section at the end. I think it's just called references. Yep. You do single references. And this can sometimes be fun if it doesn't work, but let's see. Yay, check it out. You can see then cite your sources, and it cited the name of the authors in accordance with ASA style and gave me the formatted citation at the end of the document, right? Obviously, I could cite it again. Let's cite it again. And that's fine. To cite it without the author's name, I think you do a minus in front. We could also do a semicolon to cite multiple things in the same citation. Let's see. Let's cite this one. I think it's a semicolon. It's either a semicolon or a comma. I sometimes forget. So let's see if this works. Yeah, it's cited both of them there. The semicolon worked fine. And then you can notice it populated the extra citation there at the bottom too. Right? So you use that at, and then so you put it in a single open bracket at, and then the key that you have in your bib file. Now, you're like, well, what if I don't have a bibtech file? I don't use Zotero. This is craziness, right? Well, turns out bibtech is a really commonly used format, right? So I could just go see. I was, thinking about my colleague Sarah Lageson earlier, and like, she's written some cool stuff. What if I want to cite some of her papers? Let's cite her most recent work. Okay, so that's great. I think, it doesn't work on the profile page. That's right. It works here, though. You see this little quote, right? This is going to give me my citation options. Hey, BibTech, right? BibTech. Let's click that, and that is the BibTech entry for this paper, right? So I can copy that. Let's make a new, let's just kind of add this then to the top here. But I could also save this. Let's do a new file just so you can see how easy this is. It's actually very simple. We'll call it bib2.bib and just paste that article in there, right? And let's just say that now my only citation is Professor Lageson's work. And we'll copy that key. I need to update this now. I think I called it bib2. Yeah. So now even just with that single entry in it, I could manually build out my bibtech file. Let's find the file. Where are you saved? Not in lab, that's why. Try that again. There we go. And there is the entry. Notice that there's some funky formatting in here. So if you see stuff like that, the fault is not RMarkdown. The fault is this, right? It's actually in the bibliography. Now, the nice thing about Zotero is that once I've created this file and I use the Better BibTech plugin, if I catch an error like that and I update the author's name, Zotero will then automatically update my bibliography file that I created to keep them synced up. Okay, so that's references, right? And you can notice right here, right? This is how I handled references in a professional paper, right? I have citations covered right there. And then, they automatically make correctly formatted bibliography at the end of the document. So it's a really nice way to basically never have to worry about bibliographies again, right? It's to let software handle that for you.
And so you said that for different publications, you can actually find their setup and import it.
Yep. And
they'll just do it by their rules, basically.
Yep. That's right. I never have had to worry much about formatting citations for a journal using this setup. I mean, this is also something that Zotero and other citation management software can do inside Word, right? It's the same process where you like choose whatever style you want it to use inside Word, but now we can use it in RMarkdown. Or we could use it in plain LaTeX, right? Similar setup is what we would do if we were rendering bibliographies in LaTeX. So this is a lot, and I don't intend for you to like totally understand how to do all this today. I just wanted to give you enough of a start that you could experiment with it and learn it on your own. Sorry, I cut someone off.
No, yeah, I just have a quick question on how you start importing the citations, and it's when I do it in normal Word, the more you start working on the specific articles you are quoting more frequently, or the ones that you have on your folder when you're writing in a specific paper, there's a point where you just type the first two words and then the first two letters, and it will suggest you the list of similar articles. Would that happen in this system as well, or you always have to go to the other way and copy and paste the
Yeah,
full name?
the autofill is nice that you get in Word, where you just you have a hotkey to pull up your citation, and then you just type in the first couple letters and get it. That's not currently in RStudio. I've managed to hack it before with plugins for other softwares. That there are like some. The short answer is no. The long answer is, I mean, there's a lot of like open source programmers out there that have built hacks to do something similar, but I don't find it too bad to say, oh, I know I want to cite Williams, to tab over, to just keep this open, do Command F, Williams, and then, of course, I can't find it when I need it. But let's say I know Evans Campbell is right there, right? So Evans, there it is, and just grab the key and then move that over. So that's the workflow for now. Is just to open it up in your plain text editor, or you could open. I mean, you could open this in RStudio, right? RStudio can open any plain text document, and then to just copy the key over. It's a little tedious. So that is kind of one upside to doing this in Word or something like that. I think you'll get the hang of it enough that it's worth it, but yeah, not quite as easy as it is in Word.
Yeah, I guess you get used to it the more you use it. Then, and it also leads you to be more selective on the sources you're using, or more aware of what you're quoting.
Yeah, I think to some extent.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's all these things are sunk costs, right? You get better with it as you practice it, and you can make the decision about whether it's worth it. I mean, I think this is the stage of your career, so it's a good time to kind of adopt tools that'll make you more efficient in the long run. But your call, yeah. If you find, I mean, and honestly, a lot of our crim journals are not accepting LaTeX or PDF submissions. You still have to format everything in Word, so sometimes this ends up being more trouble than it's worth for me. But I really like the way that these documents work, and I find the trade-off in terms of, okay, I need to submit it in Word. Well, I can actually just knit the whole darn thing in Word here, right? I can change the format to a Word document, knit it in Word, and clean it up once, right? At the end of the process. So I can write the way I want, and I can make sure that my tables and figures and cross references and all that stuff lines up as it should. So that's just me. I really like this plain text workflow. I get that it's not going to work for everybody, but I wanted to give you all the introduction to it that I never got, to see if it sticks for you. And if it does, cool. And if it doesn't, no hard feelings. I will say that, there is, I think, some kind of like street cred you get among like quant types by using LaTeX and being able to present your work this way. You'll notice if you like poke around on like archive or some of the like the hard sciences repositories or the economist repositories or some of those places, just about every working paper you're going to see is rendered this way, right? Is written up in LaTeX in some way, and it just because it makes the presentation of quantitative results so easy. There's a cost, but like I can make my equations pretty. I can incorporate figures very easily, and they can render as PDFs, so they look nice, right? These are PDFs inside a PDF, so they don't get like distorted like you get in Word, where you have to use a PNG or JPEG, which is a bitmap. It's a raster image rather than a vector image, so they get shrunk, they get distorted. These images will never get distorted because they're PDFs and they resize dynamically. Anyway, enough lecturing on why I like my approach, but this is my approach. I like it. It's something that our Markdown in RStudio make easy to do. And if you want to do it, God bless. And okay, last questions.
I had a really quick question. I tried installing the package you mentioned earlier about like PDFs, and it said that I needed to do a Mac text package, and so I tried doing that, and it said that it's not available for R version 3.6.3.
For tiny?
Do you know why? Yeah, yes. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm on
Explore, I just didn't know if you might know.
Yeah, I'm on a Mac and it installed just fine. I try it again. Did it say you already had it installed, or it could?
No, it just said that I needed to download like another package because So let me see here.
Well, why don't
Yeah.
you can email me
Okay.
if your challenges with that. And
Great.
yeah, I mean any LaTeX install will work. So if you have something else, that's fine too. Other questions?
Will we go back to, not now, but at some point to maybe importing photographs?
Yeah, sure. So that's on the cheat sheet, right? I had that puppy and it didn't work, and I apologize. Where's my cheat sheet? There's my cheat sheet. Okay. So if you Google images RMarkdown, um, yeah, there it is. I was right. Okay. So here's our puppy, right? And let's just say, like, let's copy image address, and instead of downloading it, let's just use this. Um, so where was our puppy? So I forget the order sometimes, but we can use this syntax. So we do an exclamation point. There's the puppy, cute. We do an exclamation point, open brackets, open parentheses, and then a URL or a path on our computer, and then we get a puppy, right? And then if we want a caption on it, it goes in the bracket, and we could say, "That's a puppy," right? And that's a puppy, right? So that's one way we could do it. We can also use, is it in Bookdown? Uh, there's another one called include graphics. No, it's not there. Forget where it is. Maybe it's in Knitter. Um, yeah, there it is. We can use the include graphics function to do something similar. We already libraried Knitter in, but I'll and what this does is it replicates the syntax of the include graphics command in LaTeX, which can be nice. So let's get this file name real quick. .jpg, that should do it. The other thing we can do, oh, that wasn't wrapped. That's not in a chunk, so that's not gonna work. Sometimes I want to do like fig.height, fig.width, fig.cap, and I can do that here, right? If I want to manipulate the size, I can manipulate it with those chunk options, right? That sure didn't work. I may not be able to get it working right. I'm sure I could eventually, but yeah, you could do that, or you could do. There's another approach that is like using the JPG function, or there's a PNG function. I don't know if there's a JPG function, but there's other functions we can use to draw graphics from files in R. But the include graphics command is probably the easiest one, or just using this markdown syntax of exclamation point, caption, and then path or URL.
The point is always having all your files and everything in the same folder, the folder where you are working your markdown, right?
That always makes your life easier.
Yeah.
It definitely makes your life easier. But in this case, I called this file from the web.
From the web, yeah.
So
No, I mean from when you imported the file
yeah.
specific in the second.
Well, in that case,
Yeah.
I can just give it the file name, and it's already in the root directory, so it doesn't need to go anywhere for it, right? A lot of times, what I'll do is I'll create a folder called viz within my projects that hold all my images. Like bringing in, oh, you see I already have one. That will have images I'm going to use, right? So if I put the puppy in viz, it will work just fine too. And that'll be relative to the root for my markdown file. So there we go. Puppies.
When you type these dimensions as well, will it center it? It will help it to be distributed equally within the text, or that needs another.
There is a way to do it, and I was screwing it up when I was trying.
And I went over the time.
It's all good. So yeah, we're over time, so anyone needs to drop. But there are like fig dot. there's fig dot where are they? Yeah, fig dot align, left, right, or center, fig dot cap, fig dot width. Right, so these are chunk options that you can experiment.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But yeah, you can align things however you want. But instead of dragging it and resizing it, doing all that, you need to do it with code.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're over time,
Thank you.
so I'm going to stop. But thank you all, and we'll see you Friday, if not before. Stay safe, stay well, and talk to you all soon.